here under the hourly trigger, and you see how the 1 minute velocity was the most extreme to the downside right here. When we make this second low, and the 1 minute velocity is not more negative to the downside than this one, this is bullish divergence. So you could draw a trend line from here to here. It's going upwards. Price is going downwards. That means price wants to snap back up. That's exactly what happened. So, when price sells under the hourly trigger, it's not an immediate sell. There's a bunch of things we look out for. First of all, what's the hourly print? Is the hourly velocity greater than -1? Oh, perfect. Finally. Okay. So look at the hourly velocity. It's not greater than -1. So that's good. That means there's a lot of buyers down here that are fighting against selling pressure. And we also could see that the 1 minute velocity diverged off the bat, and that led to this snap up move. Okay, now while we're here, let me show you guys what the pinning looks like. So over here, what this whole thing, the same glitch. Okay, look at my mouse and don't look at this line in the middle of the screen with prices on it. But you see where my mouse is? The 1 minute trigger, when it comes down to the 5 minute trigger, and airplanes off the 5 minute trigger like this, so it comes down, touches it, and then comes up. If price doesn't move sharply to the upside off of that move, it means that it's being really pinned. And what the pinning does, it basically sucks the velocity and the volume out of the stock because it's like uninteresting. And this way, when the stock makes the next move up, there's not much velocity behind it. And so it's easier for them to control it on the way up, as opposed to if when the 1 minute trigger right here comes down, hits the 5 minute trigger, comes up, and price comes screaming to the upside. That leads to a very dynamic move to the upside. So they bring out this pinning algo, and we've never seen it run for longer than 2 hours. So you could see, like, started right about here. The time was 14:08, and it ended right about here, which is almost the end of the day. So just about an hour 45 minutes, and then price lifted to the upside. So when we see this pinning algo go on, like, okay, right here, then as long as the 1 minute trigger doesn't, make a full cross below the 5 minute trigger, we're still bullish. And we know that they're going to do this for about 2 hours. They're going to try to squash velocity, but we're still bullish. And, at the end of the day, we came out of this pin, and I would expect to continue moving up tomorrow. So tomorrow, what we have to look, what could really get this thing going, and what this move can turn really explosive, is if we break above the monthly trigger right here at 30.35, and then the daily trigger is right above it. So the monthly trigger acts as a really big acceleration level. If you could see here, price broke through the monthly trigger and literally shot straight to the upside, another $6 same day. Over here, there's a bunch of pinning on the monthly trigger because the monthly velocity, we're coming off really strong monthly velocity, 0.8. So, the monthly trigger was holding good support. But once it broke down, you could see this huge move that it made to the downside because it's an acceleration level to the downside. And then over here, you got a really nice bounce off the monthly trigger. Over here, you got a really nice bounce off the monthly trigger. And over here, you got a really nice bounce off the monthly trigger. So what we would expect if price could break through 30.35 tomorrow is a nice, powerful move to the upside. And this window, September 15 to September 16, is shaping up really nicely. Price at 28.13 close. We got the hourly trigger that held through this entire, if they were going to break it down, this is where it would have broke down. If they were able to take the stock down, this is where they would have taken it down. Right here today, 10:30, SPY was selling pretty hard at some points during the day, and they couldn't break it down, and we're still above the hourly trigger. So if tomorrow morning, for example, we come out the gate and we set an hourly velocity print that's, something like this, above 0.1, we can expect to have a really bullish move. And if that happens, we're going to have a chance to attack this monthly trigger. Now, the reason why this setup in particular is so dynamic is because if the monthly trigger, where my mouse is, if we break that, we can really accelerate through the daily trigger. and we can also accelerate straight through the weekly trigger. All these triggers clustered together provides a really good opportunity for a runaway move to the upside. And so there's no guarantees, but if there's ever a really good looking window, it's going to be Thursday and Friday. So we're going to see, and we're going to track that, how that plays out tomorrow. For AMC as well, we came above the monthly trigger here, and we were gonna rock it. Like this was absolutely going to turn into an incredible move to the upside, and then CPI data came out and the market sold above 4% in one day, marking the worst day in over 2 years. So AMC moved above this monthly trigger and at 975, and the next morning it tapped 1075, a dollar move straight off the monthly trigger, and in my opinion it was very likely to keep running. And then we had this humongous CPI drop. Now, if you notice, AMC, where did it catch support? Right at the daily trigger. We zoom in on this. So we're coming off 0.06 daily velocity. It's not even that much velocity. It's really not that much. And so when you only have 0.6, you're not necessarily expecting the daily trigger to act as support, but it did. So from the fact that the daily trigger, the blue line, held support, it tells you that this stock is more bullish than you would expect, because 0.06 isn't something where price can't push down below and tap the weekly trigger. But the fact that the daily trigger held against the backdrop of not such great positive daily velocity tells you that the stock is bullish. And what happened after the daily trigger held, which told me that it was bullish, price ran from 938 to a high of 991 today. So, once the daily trigger held well, and once we popped above the hourly trigger at 949, price made a really nice move to the upside and broke above this monthly trigger. So I bought AMC calls for next week, $12 calls for 0.21. They closed at 0.27. And I also bought 10.5 calls, weekly calls, because like I showed you guys before, over here, look at this break above the monthly trigger. It was actually pre-ape. I think it was at what was it, like 18 or something, or 17, and then price ran to 27. $10 move after breaking the monthly trigger. So this is a very possible runaway setup to the upside. So for me, that's worth the gamble on some weeklies. Monthly trigger is supposed to act as a really strong acceleration level. So we'll see if that tracks tomorrow. That's AMC. Okay, for SPY. So okay, nothing at the hourly level. Yeah, so if we zoom in here, oh, this thing again. All right, 1 second. So I'm actually bullish on SPY for tomorrow. I think there's a very good chance that we come up and attack 400, possibly 405, probably a lot more unlikely. I think 400 is very doable. So, okay, I got to speak to Jim about this, because some reason, Turnips, do you have the same problem, or is it just me?
It happens to me sometimes too.
Okay, this is hella annoying. So let's just go on the day trader. Okay, so anybody new to Anemoi, this is something very important to look at. So over here we have a great example of hourly positive divergence. So you look for the most extreme reading to the downside. That happened right here. We had negative hourly velocity of negative 0.6. And then, but the low where that hourly print was 392.46. What happened was, later in the day, price made a new low right here at this is crazy. This needs to get fixed. Price made a new low at 391.33, but look at the hourly velocity. It's negative 0.5. So if this move was indeed a bearish move, and if we were going to come down further, then the hourly velocity would have been more negative than it was here. Since it was less negative, it tells you that buyers are really strong out here. Whoops. Tells you that buyers are really strong over here, and that they're about to push the stock back up to the hourly trigger at 398. So when you have hourly divergence like this, you can very much expect a move here. Those SPY calls that I took, so let me tell you the logic behind that. So here's the 1 minute and the 5 minute triggers. So first I'll show you how this looks on a bigger scale. Basically, once you get a trigger cross, you expect to move up to the next trigger. So you can see where my mouse is, that the hourly trigger, which is purple, crossed above the blue for the first time for Fubo in these entire, from April to August. This is the first time right here where my mouse is that the hourly trigger crossed above the daily trigger, and you can see price ran straight to the weekly trigger, right? So the same thing on the day trader chart. When you have the 1 minute trigger cross above the 5 minute trigger, you expect price to run to the next trigger, which is the hourly trigger. Now, the smart way to play this is that once you get this cross right here, you put a stop loss under the 5 minute trigger, which was 394.74 at the time, which is, or 75, which is why I gave that as the stop loss. My mistake was, holding through this entire nasty chop. This is just complete pinning. When you see the 1 and the 5 minute trigger just doing these are the algos just completely pinning the SPY, chopping, burning premiums, like just nothing going on. I should have stopped out right here, but I had a bullish bias and I didn't. And I thought we were going to make it to 400 this week. And I still think we do. And I was in 400 calls for Friday. And guess what? I ended up getting stopped out right here at 391.34, believe it or not. And now, at the end of the day, we're about to get the 1 minute trigger to cross above the 5 minute trigger, which will most likely send the SPY to 398.33. So, good learning lesson for me. Get rid of the bullish bias, stop out right away. And then this was actually a great buy-in over here, but I let emotions get the best of me. And Gavin was saying if we lose the day's low, like the bull thesis is over. So I just let go as soon as we lost yesterday's low of 391.74. Good news is I did put all that cash immediately into AMC weeklies at 0.13 and they closed at 0.19. So, that was a quick recovery of all of that entire loss. Okay, so for Fubu or Fubo, so again, all the people new to Anemoi, so you can see weekly divergence, right? So you have the worst weekly print right here of -6, and then the weekly velocity keeps getting better and better and better, more positive, but price makes one low right here, another new low right here, and another new low right here, while weekly velocity is actually trending bullishly, which means once you get three divergences on any time frame, 1 minute, 5 minute, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, when you get three divergences, so three times where price makes new low but velocity doesn't, then price will snap up to that trigger. And so as soon as we had, so here was the most extreme reading, and then we had one new low right here, and this is in terms of macro trend, not every specific teeny little low. So one new low here, one new low here, and the third new low here. And as soon as that happened, price ran straight to the weekly trigger. So if anybody had brought this to my attention in July, I would have definitely been buying calls 1 month out and we would have printed. Unfortunately, it wasn't on my radar back then. And then we see this rejection of the weekly trigger because we're coming off negative weekly velocity. When you have negative velocity and you attack a trigger and it's like strong negative velocity, you're 100% out of the time going to reject that trigger. Now, on the 1 minute trigger, a rejection would mean not closing over for 1 minute. If the 5 minute trigger, a rejection would mean not closing over for 5 minutes. Same with hourly for an hour. And weekly trigger, it doesn't mean that price can't break above. It just means that at the end of the week, price will be below. And so, if price comes above the weekly trigger with negative velocity, it actually makes a really good short. Whoever's new here, I just want to show you guys this because this is a awesome example of what I mean. I don't know if you guys are trading BBBY at that time, but price broke through the monthly trigger, right? So price breaks through the monthly trigger, it acts as acceleration level. So it runs from 16 to 30 within 2 days of breaking the monthly trigger, which is the biggest acceleration level. However, if we look at the monthly velocity, we're coming off negative 0.9. So this is pretty nasty. And so we knew that before the month of August ended, price would be back below the monthly trigger, and that's exactly what happened. So that's the monthly level, and then this is the weekly level. Now, what's interesting to me here is that we have an air pocket, right? So we have this trigger cross, the hourly trigger crossing the daily trigger, which means price wants to run to the weekly trigger. Whenever you have an air pocket, which is price above the daily trigger, price just moves to the next trigger. That's just how the stock market works. That is how Anemoi works. That's how the stock market works. It's that simple. So the thing here is that over here we're rejected off extreme negative weekly velocity. But if we look at the reading right now, 0.09, that is not enough to keep price below this weekly trigger. So if price breaks above 560, and I'm very confident it will get there, it will get to 560, very possibly this week. But if we can break above here, we're setting up for a very possible, powerful upside spike to 11.75. Um, so if we look at the monthly velocity, you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4 months in a row, the monthly velocity is getting less and less negative, which is a good sign for any stock. It means that like the real sellers are leaving and buyers are stepping in at the monthly level, at the big money level. And so what I want to do is I want to play FUBU calls. I want to play weeklies because this gap to 560 can be filled very quickly, probably in a day or two. So I want to play like weekly 5.5 calls. And then I want to take next week calls because if at any point price breaks above 560, I think there's a really legitimate shot at a really crazy 100% move up to 1175. I don't know if it'll happen in 1 week, but if it breaks above 560, we can definitely capitalize on a move up to 6, 7, 8, 9, and then maybe price will retrace a bit. You'll have the hourly trigger and the daily trigger come above the weekly trigger, and price will go like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, and eventually reach the monthly trigger. But the original move above the weekly trigger is normally very powerful. Oh, here, like this one. So broke at 617, ran to 795. So for me, I want to get into FUBU calls tomorrow. Um, I want to take weeklies and I want to take next week $6 calls because just for the chance that it breaks above the weekly trigger. I mean, it's gonna get to the weekly trigger. I'm fairly confident in that. That just the way this works. We saw the hourly trigger cross the daily trigger right here, and price ran straight to the weekly, and the hourly trigger cross the daily trigger here right now, and price should run straight to the weekly. So that's the upcoming play that I'm gonna give. I just wanted like you guys to understand the logic behind it, and that's pretty much it for now. So SPY, I'm expecting now a move to the daily trigger. GME, based on tomorrow's trading, we get a really good hourly print. We have a shot of taking the monthly trigger, which once we move above 30.35, price it sounds crazy, but price can really just rocket through all three of these. Rocket above 33.46. It's definitely possible. For AMC, I took some weeklies because we moved above the monthly trigger, which acts as an acceleration level. And I also took next week $12 calls. And oh wait, let me just check BBBY for a second if anything interesting is going on. So we see the monthly velocity definitely got much better. How's daily velocity looking? Nothing too impressive. BBBY actually made a really. This was very obvious. I was actually watching this all day, and I was like, I should definitely get in weeklies at some point, but I slept on it, and I wasn't paying enough attention when I should have. So you can see price fall below the hourly trigger, but the hourly velocity print was 0.03, which is nothing. There's not much going on in 0.03, so we're not bearish yet. If we look at the 1 minute velocity, let's see if there's any divergences. No, none that I could see. None either on the 5 minute. All right, and then so you get this cross right here of the 1 minute here. So let's zoom in on this. So once you get the 1 minute trigger crossing above the 5, it means that price wants to go to the hourly trigger. So I guess you could say it got close, 852, 858. It may have even tapped 858, but again, it might not have registered on Anemoi. And once the 1 minute trigger crosses the 5, you would have your stop losses set under the 5 minute trigger. So you would have got in right here at 836 and you would have stopped out right here at 842. Now, normally you would expect the price to at least be able to hit the hourly trigger, but this is one of those times where it didn't. SPY actually fell really hard during this time period. So like that's one of the examples when it doesn't. But then you cross again right here, and if you have your stop loss on a break below the 5-minute trigger, then you get in again at 841. This I wouldn't this is the 5-minute trigger acting as support. Also here, it's a loose support. It could fall a cent under and then bounce back. But you would have been long right here on the trigger cross, expecting price to run to the hourly trigger and possibly break above. And then you could see price breaks above the hourly trigger right here at 854 and accelerates straight to $9 in, what was it, in less than 10 minutes. Oh, in 3 minutes. So that's here. Price breaks up at literally 354 and reaches 8.99 3 minutes later. So that's one of the examples of the hourly trigger acting as a really strong acceleration level. All right, so that's all I got for you guys. If anyone has any questions, I'd gladly answer them. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I wanted to share. Yeah, half baked empty lunchbox. It is safe to say that passing the monthly trigger is pretty much 100% buy trigger every time. Each trigger is an acceleration level, so that's how you have to think of it. Oh yeah, let's do DraftKings. Great idea. So DraftKings, right? We nailed this one. Is GMOA here because it was his call? No, he's not here. All right, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so we just talked about filling air pockets, right? So once you get oh no, it's doing this thing again. Let's try maybe this one. All right, perfect. So first of all, you get this hourly trigger here throughout this entire period. You don't really get a clean hourly trigger cross. You get one right here, but it turns out to be a fake out bear plane. But you get this hourly trigger cross right here on July 19th. And when we get this hourly trigger cross, we're saying, okay, now price wants to move to the next trigger, which is the weekly trigger. So July 19th, August 4th, 3 weeks later, price is at the weekly trigger. That's how Anemoi works. So we get this trigger cross again, and that means price wants to run to the weekly trigger. But if we take a look at weekly velocity, right? So you can see, oh, by the way, I don't know if any of you guys remember this date, but August 16th to August 22nd, I'm just going to pull up a SPY chart. So yeah, August 16th, SPY was at 431. August 22nd, SPY was at 413. So, a $20 drop. So that's what happened here. So normally once, oh, not again. 1 second, guys. Okay. Okay, so normally when you get price break above the weekly trigger, you are expecting it to attack the monthly. But SPY, as you guys saw, sold extremely hard. I think someone's unmuted.
Up we go, 21.
It's really annoying. Okay, I'm just gonna show it like this. Okay, so when price broke above the weekly trigger here, we did expect it to come attack this monthly trigger, but we saw some really sharp selling in the SPY, which brought it back below. But currently, we have the weekly trigger at 767. This is a great example of the weekly trigger acting as acceleration. So we broke above the weekly trigger right here, and we accelerated up pretty nicely from 1772 to 20 in just a couple of days. And then yesterday we broke above the weekly trigger at 1767. One day later, we're sitting comfortably at 1850. So that's a good example of the weekly trigger acting as acceleration. Now the lotto of this play is that we want to see this air pocket filled. So if we look at the over here, this is a 59% gap to the monthly trigger, which means that it is 100% possible for price to go from wherever we close 1850 to 28 really within a couple of weeks. That's just how this works. You could see how well it was filling this air pocket on this move before SPY sold $20 in the span of 3 days. So as long as SPY doesn't do anything stupid again, there's a really good chance that we could move up to attack 28, which is why we bought the calls. And I think we're up pretty nicely right now. Okay, when you say look back at the previous 3 hours to compare hourly velocity. Okay, thank you so much, Turnips. Really appreciate that. So, MB, when you
Peaks of
say
the
look back
cycles
at the
by
previous 3 hours
selling
to compare
covered
hourly
calls
velocity, do you include
is,
the current
you
hour or
know,
go back 3 hours from the current?
institutionally
So, great
reinforced.
question. Let's look at the day trader chart. So let's say we're right here in this hour. So we go 1, 2, 3. So let's take a look at some examples. Okay. So here's a perfect example, right? Where my mouse is. So we're saying to ourselves, like, is this going to be an airplane right now? Is the 1 minute trigger going to come down to the 5 and bounce off, or is it going to cross through? So we look at the hourly velocity, and then we go 1, 2, 3. And since the hourly velocity is stronger than it was 3 hours ago, we expect the 5 minute trigger to hold as support. And you can see that's actually what happened. And then we lifted up off 1798 all the way to 1850. Up we go. Do you mind just muting your mic? Up we go 21. All right. Anybody else have anything?
Thank you so much, Darwin.
All right. So Fubu, I'm going to give the alert tomorrow of which calls I'm getting into, and then we'll see how AMC and GME move tomorrow. And SPY, I'm very much expecting to be able to tag 398 tomorrow. All right, guys. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for joining. Hope you learned something.
Thanks, James.
All right, no problem.
Thanks, James.
You got it.